translated.
Yeah.
So we're up to Laban's treachery?
Well, let's see here. I do believe we didn't get as far as I thought we were going to on Wednesday. So, yep, we're picking up with verse 21. And at this part, of course, we know that already Laban has managed to weasel 7 years worth of work out of Jacob. But in the rest of this, we're going to find out that he even gets a little bit more out of him. So, verse 21 says, And Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may go into her. Now, of course, the time was the 7 years that he agreed to serve for her. And Jacob, if you're following the euphemism here, in fact, some of the translations actually say point blank that he wants to lie with her. But when it says that I may go into her, Jacob's being blunt here. He's basically telling Laban, I want your daughter. And I want her now.
Something a father doesn't really want.
Yeah. But that's exactly what he tells him. That I want to take her to the tent. And Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. Now, on the surface, that would not seem to be any big deal. I mean, they're about to have a wedding. You would expect them to throw a party and have a feast for her. But there's something else going on behind the scenes here. That's what happens at a feast.
You get drunk.
Yeah. Laban is intentionally trying to get Jacob snookered. So verse 23, it says, Now it came about in the evening that he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and Jacob went into her. So you got two things. I've had people ask me over the years, how in the world can anybody not know the difference between Rachel and Leah? They didn't look the same. They probably didn't sound the same. Although I know two sisters in here that sometimes they do sound the same. But in most cases, most sisters don't sound the same. But you got to figure that that's exactly why Moses tells us they had a feast. He probably waited until late at night when Jacob was about 2 sheets to the wind from drinking too much. And also, what custom did they do at that time during a wedding?
They veiled the bride.
Yeah, they veiled the bride. So if the two girls had the same color hair, and if they were about the same size or what have you, plus even if there'd been a few differences here and there, if Jacob's about half drunk, he ain't gonna notice. And Laban is betting on this. So he veils Leah and brings her to Jacob and says, Here's your wife. Now the question that you would want to ask in this naturally is, where's Rachel?
Probably handcuffed somewhere else.
More than likely, Rachel's got one or both of two things going on. She has probably been tied up or Laban has had one of his servants to intentionally keep her away from Jacob, or being that she is a daughter under submission, he may have put her off somewhere and just basically told her, you're going to stay here whether you like it or not. Now, by the way, there is one other little variable in all of this story that we have not been told about so far. We won't get to that until the next chapter. But while we have not had any mentioned, Laban did have at least a couple of sons. Did you think he may have put his 2 sons to work here to keep your sister here in this back tent and don't let her out? In whatever situation, we know that Rachel doesn't come out. And Jacob is probably too wasted at this point to know the difference. So he takes what he thinks is now his wife. Now, legally, now that he has accepted her as a wife and Laban has presented her as such, in their culture, that was a wedding. She is his wife now. He takes her to the tent. And it says, and she brought her to him, and Jacob went into her, which means they consummated the marriage that night. So even if whatever he discovers the next day,
He's married.
too late now. All right, verse 24 says, Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So he's got some servants around here. He gives one of them to Leah. Verse 25 says, it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. Can you imagine sobering up, waking up the next morning and realizing that the woman you think is your wife wasn't the woman you thought it was going to be? Now, while not to excuse Laban's trickery in this, do you think Jacob had it coming?
Sure.
You think maybe there might have been a little comeuppance that God put on him, that God allowed this to happen? Because what did Jacob do to get him in this situation?
Tricked his dad.
Yeah. Stole something from his brother and his dad that he had no right to. And so now, 7 years later, he finds that the wife he thinks he's just worked 7 years for isn't the one he just now woke up with.
Gotta wonder how Leah feels about all this.
Yeah. What am I, chopped liver?
Or is it the homely girl is happy because she got a husband when she figured she never was going to get one? Or is she pretty depressed over the guy who's now her husband, is like basically really unhappy that he's her husband, you know, and regrets the whole thing?
As we will find as we continue in this, in fact, before we're done with this chapter, that question is actually answered. I don't know that it says anywhere that Leah regretted her role in it, but Leah definitely is hurt that nobody wants her. Which actually, and I guess, let me spend a little time on that issue. We had discussed in the previous chapter the fact that it says Leah had weak eyes. And there have been various interpretations of that. Some just basically have interpreted that, take it literally, it means she couldn't see well. Others said her eyes, she was kind of dull-eyed, whereas her sister had really pretty eyes. And then yet the third interpretation was it was a Hebrew euphemism, meaning that Leah wasn't too good looking. What we will see in the rest of this chapter would definitely lend credence to the possibility that Leah was probably pretty homely. Because you'll find throughout all of this, while Jacob ends up having 6 kids by her, all 6 times of her pregnancy was pretty much Jacob just being drug into it, that it was not by his choice. It was,
Gotta go see
if I
Leah.
have to, kind of situation. Because Jacob makes it very clear he didn't want her, and Leah knows she is unwanted and unloved. And I think exactly that is Laban tricks him into it, because he figures nobody's going to marry my daughter unless we trick them into it. So, came about in the morning, behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, what is this you've done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me? Now that's a pot calling the kettle black if there ever was.
Yeah. Coming home to roost.
Yeah. But Laban said, it is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Now, that's what Laban tells him. But frankly, the likelihood that that's just a lie and an excuse on Laban's part is pretty strong, because where was Jacob's family from?
The same place as Laban.
Yeah, they're all part of the same family. If that had actually been a family tradition, wouldn't Jacob have already known about it? Jacob,
He would have been looking to find somebody to marry Leah first so that he could marry Rachel. If he'd have known, if that would have been a practice. he would have been
exactly.
aware of.
Jacob, if this had been a practice that originated from where they were or of the family, Jacob would have been anticipating this, and as you say, would have been hunting around for somebody to marry her off to first, or would have been expecting the trickery. But the fact that he got taken totally off guard tells us that Laban's lying through his teeth. This was not a family practice. Or again, Jacob would have known about it. Laban's just laying this on him as the excuse for why he tricks him. Verse 27, complete the week of this one, and we. Notice he doesn't say I. We will give you the other also for the service which you shall serve with me another 7 years. Now, first of all, when he says complete the week of this one, it was their custom that the marriage, the honeymoon, the bridal period would last for 1 week. After that 1 week, he's basically telling Jacob that you're free to marry the second one too if you want. Now, it's interesting that at this point, and keeping in mind that Leah and Rachel become 2 of the 4 matriarchs of the nation of Israel. But later, at Mount Sinai, when God presents Israel with the law, what was one of the things that God outlawed?
Polygamy.
Close relations and the marriage between.
Couldn't marry 2 sisters.
Yeah.
Absolutely. God made it illegal later on to marry. I mean, he didn't make it illegal to marry multiple women. Jesus made it clear later on that that was God's intention. But he allowed polygamy at this point. But he definitely outlawed through the law of Moses that you couldn't marry 2 sisters. Which is interesting because
That's how the nation of Israel started.
the nation of Israel started. Half the tribe, well, actually more than half the tribes. 8 out of the 12 tribes all came from these 2 sisters. But anyway, so complete the week of this one, and we. Who's the we? Is it Laban and his wife? The brothers?
The family. He represents the family, right?
Apparently.
He's the patriarch. So
Yeah.
He's given it the royal we.
But that again in itself tells us a couple of things. Either Laban is presuming to speak for the entire family, or is it possible that this trickery was something that a plot the whole family hatched up? Now, would Rachel have been involved in it? Probably not. If Rachel loved him, Rachel would have ratted him out. But notice also that in this, Rachel is nowhere to be seen. In fact, Laban won't even call her by name. He just says, serve the week of this one and we'll give you the other one. Like she's a consolation prize. But this kind of tells me that probably Laban, his wife, and the brothers may all have been in on this. In fact, in order to pull this off, he probably would have had the cooperation of the whole family, wouldn't he?
Well, he's the leader. They're all taking his direction.
More than likely. All right,
And
but
and he's the example for them all, so they all grew up to be just like him.
just like him. But out of this, knowing he still wants Rachel, look what he gets out of it. Another 7 years of free labor.
And it really shows how much Jacob must have loved Rachel to be willing to serve yet another 7 years.
14 years. And it's interesting that at this point, even though he gets her after just another week, if it'd been me and I was in that situation, first opportunity I'd had,
Bye-bye.
I'd grab him and run and head for the hills. But he serves out the 7 years, which tells you that either he figured he had nowhere else to go or couldn't outrun them, or maybe he's starting to change and is willing to uphold his end of the bargain.
Be a man of his word.
This is the first indication that we see that Jacob is beginning to change. That he realizes that I got what I had it coming.
I had thought all these years that he had to work 7 more years before he got Rachel.
Nope.
I did too.
Yeah, well, that's what I was taught in Sunday school.
Because
Well, that's
I'm like you,
Yeah,
if he
that's
gets
what I
Rachel,
thought too.
what's to keep him from?
But that's not what this says.
Not what it says. Complete the week of this one, which was Leah, and we will give you the other also. So it makes it very clear. He gave Rachel to him after only a week, but expected him to serve another 7 years.
And he did.
Also, another reason why we know this couldn't have been required another 7 years. We won't see it in this chapter, but beginning in chapter 30, when we start seeing all of his kids, those kids could not possibly have been born after that 7 years. Had to have happened during that 7 year period. Now, granted, those kids were from Leah, but what caused the big ruckus, the friction between Leah and Rachel?
Kids.
Leah had kids, Rachel was barren. Well, how would we know Rachel was barren
If they hadn't been trying to have kids.
unless they had already gotten married and were trying to have kids? Absolutely.
I thought Laban was her brother and not her father.
No, Laban was Rebekah's brother,
Okay.
Jacob's mother.
Jacob's mother. Laban is Jacob's uncle. Rachel's the daughter. Because remember, Laban is introduced to her first when Abraham had sent his servant all the way back to get a wife for Isaac. And that's the first indication we have of Laban. Laban was Rebekah's brother.
And it says Laban gave his maid to his daughter
Mm-hmm.
in verse 29.
Yep. So anyway, verse 28. And Jacob did so and completed her week, and he gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. So yeah, that makes it very clear right there. He didn't have to wait 7 years. He served 7 years, but he gave her Rachel as his wife after only a week. Laban also gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maid. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban for another 7 years.
Well, I hope somebody was feeding him. If he served for nothing, where did the money come from?
Well, even back then, a lot of times they really didn't have, most of the cultures back then didn't have money. They made transactions either trading with grain, livestock, or the closest thing to money they had was to weigh out gold and silver. Not coinage, but just plain chunks of gold or gold dust. Sometimes silver. Now, that's not to say that the coin had not been invented at that point. Some places did have coinage, but they didn't here. They would have more than likely traded livestock and grain.
Coinage requires a more centralized government.
Uh-huh. And industrial equipment. All right, verse 31. Now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Now, right there, a couple of things we see. Number one, again, why would this even be brought up if Rachel was not yet married to him? Second thing we see is that while we all know what produces children biologically, what does this tell us about God's involvement?
He's the one that makes it happen.
God can decide whether you're going to have kids or not. And clearly, this points the finger straight at God, that God's the one that prevented Rachel from getting pregnant.
But it makes you wonder, why did Rachel deserve to be punished?
I don't think it was Rachel that was being punished so much as it was Jacob.
But she's the one who gets hurt by it.
I think the one that's really getting hurt by it's Leah. Imagine being in the position of Leah. I'm going to just go ahead and assume that the homely interpretation is probably correct. She knows she's not that good looking. She knows Jacob does not want her. Her dad and her family had to trick Jacob into marrying her. Look at life from her perspective. You couldn't probably have beat her emotionally any more than she already is. Now, if Laban is the trickster and the dirty little conniving thief that he probably is here, do you think Laban ever once had a kind word for her? Or do you think maybe she might have even been told by her family, you know, you're going to cooperate with this because we'll never get you married off any other way because you just don't look very good? I wouldn't be in the least bit surprised if she'd been told point blank by her daddy that you ugly girl.
And Rachel probably got treated like the princess.
And Rachel was the little princess, the favored girl, favored daughter.
Maybe Laban felt sorry for her.
Yeah, maybe. I think Laban felt sorry for Laban.
Yeah. That seems more in character for Laban.
Yeah. But the bottom line is what we have here is a tale of two daughters, one that we know is wanted, loved, and the other, who's actually the oldest daughter, knows nobody. You know, look at it from the perspective of how you would feel as a woman if you know that the husband you've been married off to had to be tricked into marrying you. He doesn't want you. He probably doesn't even like you. And you're stuck. You have nowhere to go, no other family to turn to. Unlike in our culture where you could get a job or go to school or just leave, she's basically family property. She has nowhere to go.
Is there a mama?
There is a mama, but mama is just not mentioned in any of this.
Well, I know there's a mama, but I didn't know if she was dead or.
We're never
She doesn't-
She's
She doesn't seem to be.
She's
active
just-
in there.
Whoever
just
she
not a
is,
part
she's
of the
no
pic-
Rebecca.
Yeah. We're just never told where mama is in any of this. We don't know.
Because we were talking about last, I think it was last Sunday, we were talking about how, Mama probably kept, Leah at home to do the work around the house, and Rachel wasn't she the?
She was a
Shepherdess.
shepherdess.
Shepherdess. She was out tending the sheep, and, but, Mama was probably keeping, Leah at home to do the,
And now you also may begin to see why mama kept her at home.
so the news didn't get out.
If Leah looks that bad, if she really, they all figured Leah's homely and nobody's going to want her,
No point in showing her off.
no point in showing her off.
Well, back in those days too, didn't they consider it, they didn't want to be seen in public because of their looks. Just like
Mm-hmm.
today, in some countries, it's still to have somebody with cerebral palsy or a retarded,
Mm-hmm.
what do you call it, Down syndrome person is
You hide them.
you hide them, yeah.
And I've had this happen in my own family. My dad had a cousin. She lived in Fort Lauderdale, and she had dwarfism. Only one, we have absolutely no idea where that came from because not a soul, other soul in the family had that particular issue. She had to have just been one of those weird genetic mutations. She never grew more than about 3.5 feet tall. She never got married, and she wasn't ugly, but she wasn't much to look at either. But she never got married, and she lived at home till her parents died. She stayed with them. She got herself a job and was successful as far as business, but she never even attempted to try to get married. Well, now here's the issue. Everybody else knew, that she was a dwarf, period. But her dad, my great uncle, every time somebody else would come across her or meet her, or if the conversation went to her, he'd say, "Well, she had rickets. She had she got sick and had a problem. That's why she didn't grow anymore." Even by her own admission, which I had a conversation, face to face with her a few years ago, just before she died, that she knew full well she never had rickets. I mean, she even admitted herself, "I'm a dwarf. That everybody knows that's what I am. I'm not ashamed of it." Says, but he said, my daddy never could come to terms with that. He was ashamed to admit to anyone his daughter was a dwarf, so he would tell everybody I had rickets.
That seemed to be a favorite thing to say when there was something wrong with somebody. I heard that a lot.
I had a great uncle who was mentally retarded, and he was cared for by my grandmother, his sister, for the rest of his life. And he was basically kept in hiding, and he never went to school, and he was basically a little more than a toddler in mental capacity, even in his old age.
Mm-hmm.
And as a little boy growing up in the neighborhood I lived in St. Petersburg, we had a mentally retarded man who lived down the street from us, who was a totally different era then, and they sent him to school, and he got some education, and he played in the neighborhood with all the kids, and he was like a 50-year-old man out there playing baseball in the streets with the kids because he was behaving just like one of the kids.
Right.
So we grew up with him, and it was a totally different situation from that one generation to the next, where they stopped keeping them hidden away, and they started getting them some education and allowing them to function in society. I mean, they could send Clifty to the grocery store, for a loaf of bread, and he'd come home with the right change. But my great uncle never left the house.
Mm-hmm.
It was totally different from that one generation to the next. So even just a few generations back, like you said, people were just denying those things and not wanting to, let that family secret out kind of thing.
And my family, they were all Christians. That part of my family, they were all committed Christians, but they couldn't, for social reasons, come to grips with the fact that they had a daughter who had a physical problem. And I think that's probably the same thing that happened here, is that you had a family, and I'm not going to say they were, that Christian would describe these people, but I think what you ran into was a mother and a father and possibly a couple of brothers that didn't want to admit they had a daughter who might not have been the most desirable in the world, and I think they basically hid her until they could marry her off by trickery to Jacob. But anyway, the bottom line, and we'll finish here for tonight, is verse 31 makes it clear that Jacob did not love her, and every one of you ladies in here can resonate with this, or you would know this, that if your husband doesn't love you, you know it. So that's the situation she had to deal with from that point on. All right, and we will pick up there on Wednesday. And yes, just so before anybody asks, I will be going back and forth to Tifton, but I will be here Wednesday evening unless the car explodes.
Because he has to go to